And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again across the Louisiana plain, where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism in Louisiana, elevating the cause of constitutional conservative citizens across the state, and rapidly now draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your day. We are so grateful for you. You're the best listening family anyone could possibly hope for, and we are only here because of your encouragement, your prayers, and your financial support. If you are looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd really appreciate it if you'd also help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us, subscribe to it, and share it. You can share short clips instead of the full episodes from our YouTube and Rumble channels, and links to those are always in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us. We are so honored today to have a great patriot joining the show. Joe Oltmann, who hails from Castle Rock, Colorado, is a man of faith. He's a warrior for truth, integrity, and a return to constitutional principles. Before we talk to Joe, let me read the scripture of the day. It is Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 22. And it says, "So I saw that there is nothing better for people than to be happy in their work. That is our lot in life, and no one can bring us back to see what happens after we die." And I read that this morning, and it really struck me because we can get so caught up in the news, in the actions of each political figure and the horrible things going on in the world, and we can feel paralyzed and depressed. But Solomon's point here is so true. We're only here for a short time. We need to find joy. We need to find the joy of the Lord in the work that we do. That is what gives us the strength in our body and our mind to keep going. So let me encourage us all today. Find joy in your work. We are winning. God wins, and we are on the winning team. Of course, we need to keep going, but let's do it from the overflow of the joy of the Lord rather than grinding it out with gritted teeth one day after the next. We are supposed to be having fun. We're supposed to be the happiest, freest people on the planet. We're on the winning team, and that's the most fun place to be. And I'm having fun, Chris. I hope you're having fun.
I'm having a great time. And one of the ways that I'm able to have fun, despite some stressful days and stressful moments, is remembering the words of John Quincy Adams, that duty is ours and the results are God's. So we do our duty as we know it and let him handle the results. And that way we can stay in the moment, work hard and do it joyfully. But that's such a great reminder. Well, speaking of a good Christian conservative who has been a voice for election integrity, as you said, Joe Oltmann is with us today.
Joe.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know. Joe Oltmann. Joe is the CEO and founder of Penn Business, which is a national data tech company. Joe is the two-time EY Entrepreneur of the Year nominee and founder, very importantly, of FEC United, which is focused principally on restoring integrity and accountability in our government based on constitutional principles. And boy, do we need it. Joe also is the founder of Conservative Daily, a major conservative advocacy and news outlet, and is the co-host of the Conservative Daily podcast. Joe is busy. Welcome, Joe. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
It's our pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
So, by the way,
absolutely, such a pleasure to have you.
My name kind of blends together.
Yes. Well, I want to call you Joel whenever I'm like, when we were having conversation and show prep, it's an easy slip.
Yeah.
Yes. I too have been called far worse than Joe, far worse than Joel. But anyway, Joe, tell us a bit to start, because you've never been on our show before, a little bit about your background and how you got involved in election integrity generally in the United States.
By accident. I'm a system architect expert. I founded my company 12 years ago. I never got involved in politics. And frankly, I didn't get involved in this because I was searching out election fraud. I got involved in this because back in March of 2020, they shut everything down. I watched friends of mine burn to the ground, and it was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable to see these businesses that we dealt with losing their life savings while politicians were out there saying that you need to go shop at Target and Walmart and all these big guys while stepping on the bodies of those people that have put in their entire life savings into serving the community. So that led me to be on the call with Antifa. Eric Coomer was on there. And frankly, it's really kind of a weird set of events that put that in my path, which I think is why I've put myself in that position where I'm chasing that truth, right? So I believe that this is the path God put me on, and I'm going to stay on that path.
And you, Joe, very, very interesting that, I mean, your first engagement in public affairs, as you said, was not regarding election integrity. It was regarding these draconian lockdowns and protocols that were destroying people's lives and businesses in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I got involved and started the Reopen Colorado movement that spread across, I think, all 50 states. And the idea is how do we let them ball up the Constitution, throw it in the trash, and just walk away from the reality that we have a right to self-govern. And so that's how it started. And it's actually going pretty well now because they've been able to pull back the veil, and that veil of all the bad things, improprieties that this rotted apparatus of government has been doing to us for decades.
Yes, I would say that not only you, Joe, but many others have been fully vindicated with regard to our quote unquote conspiracy theories, because it appears more and more that the entire pandemic, even the origin of it, was based upon a fraud. That's the way it appears. Yeah. How did that lead to your involvement in election integrity and specifically the 2020 presidential election? Well,
they called me a liar. And there's a lot of things that I am. And that, I always say that there's a before Jesus and an after Jesus. And I was in a Boy Scout growing up. I grew up in a very poor environment, and I've been blessed with an immense amount of success. But I've never hurt anyone, and I've never hurt anyone on purpose, I guess I should say. But for the last 15 years, I've lived by my faith. I've lived by 17 years. I've lived by the idea that truth is that one thing that you can't walk away from. You have to have courage. And my dad always told me, what's right is rarely popular, what's popular is rarely right. But I found myself as a system architect being told that I lied about the Eric Coomer call, and because I didn't record it.
Tell Joe, before you go on with that, because you've mentioned the Eric Coomer call a couple of times, contextualize that for us, because a number of our listeners may not be familiar with what you're talking about.
So it started with this Antifa kid that came to an FEC United meeting, and he said, I used to be Antifa, and basically these guys they're not journalists. These are Antifa activists that are writing all these bad articles about you. And that's the first time that anyone's really taken an interest in me from the standpoint of writing all these things about me like I'm some sort of right-wing extremist. They started out saying that I was a racist. Well, I come from a mixed family, so that didn't stick. Then they said I was a homophobe. My business partner's a gay married Jewish father of two. And so they kept falling on their faces. And then he said, look, and the first time he told me that, I was like, good for you. But the next meeting that he came to, they walked up to me, he said, hey, I can get you on this call. And so you can actually, and then I had you could see these Antifa journalists. So then I had an interest, and I was like, okay, I'd love to uncover Antifa inside of the journalism world. And so I got on the call in my office. He was very nervous. He did not want us to record anything. I think the idea of them finding out who he was terrifying to him. And so I listened, took notes. And, another friend of mine, John Tigtigan, from Benghazi, he was on the roof and protected all those people. He was supposed to be in that call and had to go travel to speak at a different event. So I didn't really think much of it. It was kind of a call that was very hyperbolic when they asked what are they going to do if Trump wins, and Eric responds, don't worry about Trump. He's not going to win. I made sure of it.
This was a Antifa call, Zoom call or whatever, and you were sort of interloping on it. You were sort of infiltrating that call.
Right.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, they said that I made it up after the election and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to put it all to rest. On October 16th or October 15th, I gave a talk at the Bandimere Speedway, and it was recorded, where I said that I have infiltrated Antifa, that I know that they're not journalists. These are Antifa activists, and talking about what I had back in September. Now, I did not know anything about Eric Coomer. I did not know anything about Dominion. I didn't talk about Dominion other than the fact that I thought that there was this guy at Dominion. I didn't know that they had controlled that much of our elections. Because frankly, when I did the research about Eric Coomer and Dominion voting systems, I didn't dig into it because that's not what I was looking for. But on October 16th, there's a line of events that happened that perfectly proves that everything I said, did, and I'm a system architect. I dug into the system, and you saw the ASOG report that came out in December. You saw all the things tied directly to Coomer that point out that he's a anti-American, police-hating, Trump-hating Antifa member. So all of that just happened to happen. That just happened to be the guy that runs 50% of the vote of the American people. And so then you obviously have the fact that he ran into a building, he lied to the police 4 times, and he wrote articles about how he raped his wife and made her bark like a dog and peed on her. I mean, this guy is just a devil. These are real things about this person. And then you have the New York Times that put him up on a pedestal and said he's a perfect villain while walking past all of those facts, slandering me in every way, shape, and form. So, and then there comes the death threats and the fact that my family had to be protected, and I had personal security detail living in my house for 18 months, and that started 2 days after I came out, with what happened on. And I first talked about this on the 6th, which is a Friday. They hadn't even called the election yet. And then the 9th, I did the podcast that said, "Hey, here's what I know." I didn't attack Dominion. I attacked Eric Coomer. I was like, "This is what I know. This is the things I heard." And 2 days later, people are coming to my house with guns trying to kill my family. I mean, it just, the fact that I have to live in a house with bulletproof glass and thermal cameras, and I've gone through all this stuff, it just strengthened my resolve and the fact that I needed to dig into the systems. And when we did, we found an amazing amount of rot, and the media just kind of gaslit the American people and said, "Nothing to see here. There's no evidence." There's mountains of evidence.
Tell us what you found, Joe.
So we can start with the infrastructure. So I'm going to kind of go back here if I can for a minute
You can.
In November. So November 6th, I was up elk hunting. My best friend is a guy. He just turned 87. He's an amazing man. One of the most gentle. He's an ex-accountant. He sold his practice to Deloitte long ago. I always say 100 years ago he was an accountant. But he's been an amazing friend to me. And we were up elk hunting at his cabin, and I get this thing that said Eric Coomer, Dominion Voting Systems, that four areas and it had his name, and my heart sunk right in this article down in Georgia. And I was like, wait, whoa, put the brakes on it. So that's when I dove into his social media. That's when I dove into everything and found all the things I found out about him. And then, but my friend said, "Joe, just stay out of it." Right. And so that's when the conflict in me started of, my life will never be the same. I really don't want to get involved in this. He's telling me, "Joe, just stay out of it. You've already given up the fact that you didn't win the EY Entrepreneur of the Year because you wouldn't stop talking about everything else related to shutting down the community." And then here we are, and I got to make a decision. Do I tell people? Do I not tell people? And so I left. It's the first time me and him ever had a fight. And I called my wife and said, "I'm coming home, and I don't even know how I feel about this, but here's what I know." And, that Monday I decided that, that I needed to step out. And when I did, he wrote an article in the Denver Post, I believe it was December 9th or 10th, where he said that I made up all the Facebook posts and he didn't have a Facebook account. They just made it all up. I made it up. So then the death threats intensified, and they went after my wife and they went after my kids, and it was really bad. It was a really bad time. And then when he sued me, I was like, well, all right. First of all, he called me a liar. He said that I'm lying about this. So let me just dig into the system and see if it's possible. And that's when I started looking at publicly available information and put a big map together of what I thought how the elections work based on compressing all the election data I brought from different states. And then I built a model, and then I sent it to people. I sent it to congressmen's offices, and I sent it to Washington. And I was like, this is how the elections were stolen. And that was back before anyone.
And what's the timeline for that, by the way?
So that was like the 18th, or I think I got sued like on the eve of, I think they served me right on the eve of Christmas. I think it was like the 23rd of December.
That's about right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it all kind of blends together.
Sure.
But, I had the ASOG report. I had, the manuals from Dominion. I had all this stuff. And so I sent it to them and said, here's the diagram of how they steal the elections. I called the big con and the small con. And in doing that, I was able to tell them what was going to happen next. And I said, this is how they're going to steal the elections in the Georgia runoff. So they asked me to come to Washington. It was January 4th. And I was like, listen, the small cons, the Ruby Freemans, the Shay and Ruby Freeman, those are all small cons. Those are distractions. The water pipe break, right? Those are things that get you to chase something so that chaos favors the op, not the people. I was like, well, let me tell you what the architecture of the system is. Keep in mind, I did not talk to anyone about this, right? It's not like I was out there, socializing this with different groups. I was just doing interviews talking about what I knew. And I was getting more and more angry as people were coming to my home and sending powder through the mail to intimidate my family and making death threats. And they're going to make me drink through the straw for the rest of my life. I mean, just terrible things that they're doing to my family.
Yeah. And Joe, you were simply sharing information that you had discovered as you moved along, starting with that, I guess it was the September Zoom call with Antifa when you heard those comments from Coomer.
Yeah, it was in September.
Yeah. And then you start to investigate, you start to gather information, you start to do some interviews, and then that's when you get all this blowback and retaliation. And ultimately, then he sues you over it. And he's suing you for defamation, right?
Yeah, he sued me for defamation. And frankly, I was just telling it as it was. But when I was in a grocery store, I think a couple days after I did the interview, and somebody said they were going to kill my family. Like a tall guy in a mask comes in while I'm at the grocery store picking something up, and he's talking about, I don't remember the words. And frankly, this whole time, I think over time, as you start to come down from what can only be described as a hyper awareness where everything looks like a nail, like people are coming to your house with guns. I was living in an RV in front of my house because my house was under massive construction. So I had to put metal plates around my bed so that if somebody shot into it, it would not kill my wife or myself. My house has bulletproof glass and thermal cameras, and I still live that way today, right? I still have to live in this heightened awareness. But I think when you get to that, you get super angry. Like it's fight or flight, right? So if you're a fighter, you go straight to fight. And so when he sued me for defamation, I was ready. Like I wanted to rip this guy's face off because frankly, had it not been for me, no one would have looked deeper into Dominion. No one. Had I not come forward, no one would have looked at the infrastructure of Dominion or how the systems work. No one.
Yeah.
And Joe, I think back to 2020 and the aftermath of 2020 for me personally, and you're exactly right. When I spent a lot of time in DC. I lived there for 14 years. So I know a lot of political operatives just by nature of where I lived. And everyone I talked to was like, well, of course there's election fraud. There's always election fraud. But we're talking like 20, 30 people double stuffing the ballots. We're not talking about there's no systemic fraud. And that was going to be the lie that was allowed to be perpetuated. And I love what you said about the big lie and the little lie, or the big fraud and the little fraud, because we were just looking at the report that came out last night or today from True the Vote. And it says that Catherine Engelbrecht and I can't remember his name right now, her partner, said they couldn't produce evidence of the voter fraud in court. And whatever the case may be, why ever they may not be doing that, to me, it does point to this same issue that was the little fraud. This is the big fraud. The machines are the big fraud. This is where the big changes happen.
100%. And you can't walk past all the evidence we have in multiple states. You can't walk past it. It's impossible for you to walk past the evidence, the stuff that you have out of Mesa County, where we found a separate database. And by the way, I was talking about separate databases and a connection to be able to know once you voted, once you know who voted, you also know who didn't vote. I predicted the outcome of the runoff election in Georgia before it even happened. How did I do that if I did not understand the system architecture or what was happening inside the machines? I even looked into the adjudication process that was owned by Eric Coomer. Like he owned it. So there's so much information that it's impossible to ignore. And by the way, why the heck would I give up a $250 million payday, right, to step in the middle of an election fraud soup salad? Why would I do that?
Yeah.
I didn't do it for advertising clicks. I didn't do it because I wanted to put my family in jeopardy, and I wanted to have my reputation, which was nearly flawless, and working in communities that help. I mean, I literally was the guy that helped. I gave money to kids in the inner city so they could go to private school. I worked on the school to prison pipeline bill to stop them from sending these young men to prison for 10 years for a half ounce of marijuana. I was a mentor of these. I had nothing to do with politics. I sat on multiple boards. I was a Tocqueville member. I mean, I love people, and I felt this guilt of being so successful and not giving back to my community. And so it flies in the face of this guy's a Satan. He's got a Satan tattoo on his arm. He literally talks about raping his wife. He hates Trump and puts up the Antifa manifesto. And all of a sudden, I'm bad. And then when I find out all the things that happened, I get called a liar. And by the way, I'm past it now. I'm at the point where I just have accepted the fact that these radical demons on both sides of the aisle are going to do everything they can to step past the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And tell us, this is obviously, your experience was very specific to Dominion, at least at the start. Is there any ability for, I feel like I've heard this from a lot of people in our state and in other states, really, okay, so we don't have a lot of love for Dominion. We've heard the problems with Dominion, but surely there's a machine that's going to work for us. Can you put that to rest?
There isn't a machine that'll work for us.
Yeah.
There is no safe machine out there unless you can make it transparent, right? And by the way, this is the voice of the American people. This is the most sacred thing that protects all other foundational aspects of this nation. You cannot have a constitution without getting rid of and making sure that you have integrity in the voice and even the very thing of representation. Like right now, if you were to dig into the Republican and Democrat Party, they choose who you get to choose. You don't get to choose because they find ways to use the same apparatuses that they're using against the election integrity movement. They find those apparatuses to get rid of candidates that they can't control. And that's what you got with the Jeff DeWitt guy, the head of the Republican Party. Our problem is not Democrats. Our problem is this elitist uniparty that has created this rotted apparatus at every part of our government.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information.
To what extent, Joe, did the steal, the 2020 presidential steal, and I'm asking this because Eric Coomer was the head of, a huge electronic voting vendor. To what extent was the election altered or stolen because of electronic fraud in the machines? And if so, how was it done? Now, you got to dumb it down some, but explain it in layman's terms.
All right. So it's called a PID controller. So it's a way to actually fix the outcome. And I have to tell you some other things that'll show kind of the proving ground. In the Arizona audit, every box was open. Some of the boxes had up to 30 different precincts in one box, which is impossible because it's not possible to have 30 different precincts in one box. Now, every box is open except for the ones that were set aside for the risk limited audit, right? Those were still sealed. Well, and then you had ballots that nothing was actually put together. So you had ballots that were thrown into every box. Well, how did that happen? Well, they knew what the outcome was that was in the machine and how many people had votes. And they were able to uncover fraudulent ballots inside of that. That's in the report, the Maricopa audit report. And we know that there was major issues with the 2022 election with the same pieces. So if you know who votes and who doesn't vote, and you have dirty voter rolls, you can literally create votes out of thin air. Like the machines can literally create a ballot that looks like it was filled in by a human hand. And then all they had to do is go back and put the pieces together. Put the other ballots in those boxes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they mated the fakes to match the fakes that were in the machine.
Right. But you didn't even need that. That's why the cast vote records are so important. And we've been able to go back and figure out where they flip votes in different counties. So you can turn it on, turn it off. You can make it only happen in one county, not another county if you have full control over that county. And it only takes one person that sits behind a computer that tells it where and when you can flip or create fraudulent ballots in the system. It only takes one person. Everybody's like, well, you need to have thousands of people. No, you don't. You need to have an intelligence apparatus, which is a part of it. That'd be the CIA and the FBI. And we know for a fact that they stepped out and interfered with election fraud investigations across the country. We know they did it with Shea and Ruby down in Georgia. And that Shea and Ruby went to the police station and said, oh, you got to know about these flash drives, what they can do. Oh, my gosh. Well, how'd they know about the flash drives? Nobody even talked about the flash drives. Matter of fact, we had not even done a deep dive into the flash drives when they spoke of it. But then they got swooped up by the FBI, taken over here. They had them file defamation lawsuits against the Gateway Pundit and Mayor Giuliani, even though they freely walked into the police station in order to confess their crimes. We have, and then you look at the Garland Favorito stuff out of Georgia. You look at the stuff at Mesa County, where we were able to uncover a separate database of voters and votes on the machine, and a system called MySQL management software, which allows you to basically, without having any log files, go in and change and manipulate the output variables inside of that election.
Wow.
That is just staggering to think about.
Fact.
We just had Tina Peters on not too long ago, and she kind of gave us the big picture, but this is kind of a peek behind the curtain.
Joe, what about the people who say, and my gosh, has this been a litany and a refrain? Oh, there have been all these lawsuits brought to try to show election fraud, and they've all been drummed out of court, and they've all been dismissed. Well, our response to that was those lawsuits have not been dismissed based on the evidence. They've been dismissed because of a lack of standing. What are your thoughts on or your response to the notion that, look, they've had opportunities to go to court and the judges have said you don't have any evidence?
Okay, so let's talk about the case of Texas v. Pennsylvania and how the Supreme Court came out and said that they had no standing. I mean, every legal scholar that is known to man said that how does one state not have standing in a national election when it has been proven that they broke the constitution of their own state in administering those elections, and that they did not have transparency. So we know that the apparatus of our government is rotted to the core. It is not what it appears to be. It's not. And you don't have to look very far in order to see that. But beyond that, there are 30 cases that I always see this thing where they say that every case they have that's been thrown out. That's not true. Of the 30 cases that have gone to the place where they actually had the ability to look at the evidence, 22 of those went in favor of Trump and or the surrogate that was seeking, including ones in Pennsylvania, that had to do whether or not that they broke the constitutionality of their elections in Pennsylvania in 2020 and in 2022, which they found in their favor. So there are lots of cases out there, but that's not what the radical left nor the establishment wants you to hear, because they have controlled the flow in and out of information on both sides.
They have. And speaking of the control of information, we just saw, well, we have been seeing over the last couple of months, really, an increasing flow of information coming out about the role that the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, played in censoring the American people related to specifically the 2020 elections. And it started really, I would think, a little bit, maybe a year and a half ago with the Twitter files. And then most recently, we saw an article this past week in the Gateway Pundit about CISA's organizing role in an election day call with leftist organizations, with tech companies at the center of the censorship regime, and elected officials from across the country, including our own Secretary of State at that time, Kyle Ardoin, who you met with. So what's your take on this coming out right now? And do you have any hunches on what that meeting was about?
Well, first of all, Eric Coomer was on that meeting. He was in that meeting.
So the head of Dominion at that time.
The head of strategy and security for Dominion Voting System was on that meeting. And why did it include the FBI? Why did it include other organizations? And why were they already starting to socialize the idea that there would be misinformation and disinformation? Because they knew that they couldn't cover every hole. And look, if this was a murder case, and you said, "Hey, look, I don't have a gun, a smoking gun." Well, we've now found the smoking gun. We found these secret, what I call RICO violations and of the public trust. And then you have all the other evidence that exists. And by the way, when I met with Kyle, he goes, why would we do that? And I started showing him evidence. He admitted when he was in that meeting that there are massive problems, and frankly, I got to get to the bottom of it, because I kept putting things in front of him and said, "Tell me about this." And he goes, "Where'd you get that?" Put this from. Where'd you get that? Put this from. Where'd you get that? And I was like, "I don't know. I'm a leprechaun. I found it." So after he saw those things, he said, "I'm going to go back and I'm going to dig into it." And then he started playing the part of, "I'm going to get rid of Dominion. I'm going to get rid of Dominion. Get rid of Dominion." But then he didn't. And then he betrayed the trust, showing that, one, he's either compromised, he was compromised from the beginning, or two, they came to him and said, "Here's what we know about you. You either toe the line or we're coming after you."
Yeah. Well, Joe, in a meeting that Kyle had a couple of years ago, well after you had been in the public eye, making the allegations you were making and doing your investigative work, Kyle Ardoin happened to have been on a Zoom call with the National Association of Secretaries of State, of which he was chairman, and he makes the statement that, and I guess he would be alluding to people like you and us and others when he made this statement. He said, cybersecurity is still the main issue that we face, especially one that we can't prevent, that one that we work very hard as election officials to prevent and to deal with. He said, and that's misinformation and disinformation. And that's when our partnerships with our federal partners and our local partners to get the word out as election officials to prevent and deal with it. Misinformation and disinformation, so that we can show people where they can get trusted information and how you can attack some of these misinformation and disinformation campaigns that are attempting to disengage voters from the process because they suspect the process. So we just need to continue our efforts. I'm proud of what NAS has done and my colleagues from around the country. That does not sound like the same person that you were speaking to, Joe, who was telling you, "I understand the concerns. We got to get rid of Dominion." So is he schizophrenic? Are we dealing with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde here?
Yeah, I think that this is, was he compromised before? Is he compromised now? I don't know. I can only guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's I just find it interesting that you've gone forward and all you've done is speak the truth, and you've been tried to put forth your evidence. And by the way, Danielle and I were talking before the show, and I know and you know that the truth is the paramount defense to a claim of defamation. So you're being sued for defamation, which should open the door for you to be able to go forward and present evidence that you have of what you're claiming. So what is the status of the suit at this point, and how do you feel about it? I know it's several years old now. What's going on with the suit at this point?
I feel great about it. The truth is a great equalizer. I didn't lie to anybody about anything, and he has not done himself any justice as far as defaming himself. And so I, coming to my house and attacking my wife and my kids and telling me that he's not a part of that is just one bold-faced lie. So it's in appeal right now for the fact that for anti-SLAPP, and my guess is it'll go forward because the institution of the judiciary in our state is rotted to the core. These are the same people that took President Trump off the ballot, or wanted to take President Trump off the ballot for an insurrection that never happened. They don't feel like that they can rely on what the American people want because they want to institutionally enslave us. And with that said, I got to go. I got to jump on my next meeting. I'm more than happy to do this again. Yeah, but
well, we're very, very happy to have had you on, Joe, and we're going to be following the suit, following your work. Before you go, you need to let our folks know how they can reach you and how they can follow you.
Yeah, so you can follow me at Real Joe Oltmann. That's RealJoeOltmann, and I'm at Joe Oltmann on Truth, and that was on X, and then on Truth I'm at Joe Oltmann, and I have Conservative Daily Podcast. That's a pretty popular podcast. We're on Frank Speech, and we're on 146 radio stations if you get the opportunity to listen to us. And I actually don't understand why so many people do listen to me, because I wouldn't listen to me. But
well, you're probably not the most objective judge on that, Joe. So yeah. But anyway, I hope you have a great day. Keep up the good work, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thanks. God bless you.
You too.
Thanks, Joe. God bless you. Chris, it's always refreshing to talk to people who just speak the truth, see things very clearly in black and white, and have really, I would say Joe and someone like Tina Peters have put everything on the line to pursue the truth for the people, for the future of the country. And it's just an amazing thing to behold. And it's so inspiring.
I'm making a religious analogy here, but you have people who say that with regard to the apostles and their testament, the ones who were with Jesus and followed him, about whether he was crucified, whether he rose from the dead, all the things they experienced. And people say, oh, they're just making this stuff up. It's just a big orchestrated lie. Do people who are lying about something that fundamental allow themselves to be taken to a point where they're executed and martyred for that? I wouldn't be doing it in order to perpetuate a lie. And in this situation here, I have a difficult time believing that Joe Oltmann would be subjecting himself and his family to all of this vilification for a lie. I just don't believe it.
Well, exactly. He had nothing to gain and everything to lose by sticking his neck out. So I think that's a pretty solid test.
Yeah. And I hope he's able to go forward and put forth his evidence in his case and ultimately prevails on his lawsuit, because we've got significant problems with these voting machines. As everybody who has a modicum of common sense and follows developments and events should know by now. The only people who don't know and understand that these machines are vulnerable are people who are willfully ignorant because they're invested in a contrary narrative and they just refuse to believe anything else.
Exactly. And, one thing that you can look at Joe and see is that he has the receipts. He did his homework. He has the evidence. He has the case built for how the structure functions. He's able to predict how the structure functions or how the system functions. And the people who cry, no, the machines are great. What do they have? What do they have? They have nothing. They just say that, but they actually have nothing to back that up. So it's just completely upside down, where the evidence gets dismissed and people who hold the evidence get dismissed and demonized, while the people who protest and claim that everything's okay have nothing to back up their claims.
Right. And one of the things that does concern me is the venue, frankly, of Joe's lawsuit, the defamation suit. It's in Colorado. It's in Denver District Court. Well, as Joe mentioned, it was the Colorado Supreme Court that basically, with absolutely no legal or constitutional basis whatsoever, pulled Trump off the ballot. Fortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a 9-0 decision, reversed the Colorado Supreme Court and said, what are you doing? This is a fundamental violation of due process. He hasn't been convicted of anything, and this sets just an extraordinarily dangerous precedent. Even the left-leaning associate justices were on board with how nefarious this is. Yet the Colorado Supreme Court found some frivolous basis to remove Trump from the ballot. So, and this is the same state that Joe's lawsuit is pending in. So we pray for it, and obviously anything can happen, but he's fighting an uphill battle legally and procedurally in that state, quite frankly.
It seems like it.
Yeah, but I'm very excited about the fact that he's out there on 146 stations fighting for truth. And what a warrior he is. And it's good to be here to lend a voice to Joe Oltmann. And I, Danielle, never like to end the show without thanking all of our increasing number of listeners across the state of Louisiana who are building us, helping us to continue to build our platform here, where we are resonating. You know what? Let me just say this. Our platform is becoming fat. It's becoming a fat form because it's getting so wide, so broad, so heavy, so deep, and so high. And we are just really, I'm just so excited about it. I love what we're doing. I love the good we're doing. And I thank our listeners and subscribers and ask them to continue to spread the word about the state of freedom, because we will not censor the truth. We will tell the truth all the time. And I think people are coming to realize that they can trust our voice when it comes to expressing the voice of constitutional conservatism in Louisiana and integrity.
They can indeed. And I will differ with you on one point there, Chris. I'll say that no woman will ever, say that she likes a fat form. But other than that, you're spot on.
you're exactly right. Well, to be honest with you, I've never in my life called a woman fat because I didn't want to get a fat lip.
Well,
and that even goes for my wife, because No, we are just extraordinarily happy about where we're growing and developing. And look, to have Joe Oltmann on our show today in the middle of this lawsuit and being able to follow it is such a blessing.
It is. And if people would like to continue to support the work that we're doing or start supporting the work that we're doing, you can do that at freedomstate.us. You can go there. If you want to drop us a line to inquire about advertising, you can do it there, or you can just give online there. So we'd really appreciate it. You can also send a check to P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana, 70343. And Chris, next week, the crime session.
The crime session.
And LeCag's going to be there, I know, front and center. We've already started delving into the legislation, you more than me, and we will be making our voices known.
Right now, Danielle, there are about 19 pre-filed bills, half and half, about half in the House, half in the Senate. Some of them are very good, and others, frankly, are not. And we're going to be calling the shots from the perspective of the Constitution. And, you know, we're going to be very honest and clear about it. And I cannot wait to get down there. I can't wait to have a show very soon where we give a little preview of that session and go over some of those bills and do some calls to action. We have a lot going on. Then we have the ordinary session coming up, the regular session, where we're going to be promoting some very good legislation. We just have so much to be thankful for and happy about. And, you know, as William F. Buckley said, Danielle, inveighing we shall go. Inveighing we shall go cheerfully and happily. And each day, with God's grace and courage, take another step to preserve the great state of freedom in Louisiana.
Amen. Thanks, Chris.
Amen.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to The State of Freedom, LLC, at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana, 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.